Hi, I'm Jeff Cole, and we're here at the family farm. This place has been in the family for, well, almost since 1900. It's kind of important because I'm going to talk a little bit about two things. The historic water rights, which date back before the certificate, and here in Sequim, that's a big deal. We've got something called the Dungeness Water Rule, and in fact, I recently had to develop off part of our farm. I have acquired the farm from the family's estate probably 6 or so years ago, and tried my hand at farming, and it is difficult to make money farming. So we are developing off part of it, but during that process I was able to discover a few things that I wasn't aware of, and I just thought it'd be interesting for other people to know. Part of the history, you know, they make you do a bunch of reports when you develop, and one of those is an archaeological report and wetland engineering report and Corps of Engineers and a lot of others. But through the process and through the histological report, we've discovered a few things. We knew that this farm used to be 120 acres when my uncle and his dad actually built the barn, and it was a state-of-the-art dairy facility back then. But it was 120 acres, and back in 1998, the State Department of Transportation filed an eminent domain claim and took half of our farm when they put the Sequim 101 bypass through. They liked our wetland, and it was very interesting how they decided to take it. They basically filed a fine against my aunt and uncle for $125,000. At the same time, they filed the eminent domain case, and my opinion is that they weaponized the legal system to get them fighting two battles, and it was really pretty unjust because you know, the Fifth Amendment ensures that if they take an eminent domain action against you and condemn your property, they're supposed to pay fair compensation for it, or just compensation, and you know, they're farmers. They didn't have a lot of money, and so they get an attorney that I don't think did a great job for them, but basically they lost the eminent domain case and they lost against the fine. They fined him for digging the duck pond, creating the wetland, which you can do as a farmer. I'm not sure how they lost that one. And he sold the peat moss off, which I think you can also do as a farmer, but that was why they fined the 125. So they only got $325,000 for 60 acres in the city. Then they took off the 125. I think the attorney took almost 100 grand. I think he walked away with less than $100,000 for 60 acres in the city. That was just in 1998. To put that in perspective, the US Census, I was just looking at the numbers the other day. In 98, the median price from 1998 to today has only gone up 115% in the US. And today, the value of this property, you know, I retained 60 acres, or I purchased 60 acres here on this side, basically from the tree line back here to West Sequim Bay Road. The part I'm developing is 44 acres, and when that's all built out, that property, 125 parcels at $100,000+ each, you know, $12–13 million. Even if you back out the pre-improvement cost, it's still probably $5 or $6 million. To get 20 years ago, $100,000 I think is criminal. In addition to that, the real story that I discovered that I wasn't aware is just the history of the water. This farm has unprecedented water rights. Dating back before the certificate, as I mentioned, it's important because in 1917, when they came out with the certificate rules, they basically were trying to restrict the number of users off the water system. We have a gravity-fed water irrigation system coming off the mountain that runs, we've got 6-inch pipe running at 185 to 200 PSI. It's insane pressure. We can run multiple water cannons at 150 PSI each. I've got 14 plus heads here on my property here, and we had additional risers in the 60 acres. In fact, in the 60 acres that they did take, there was even a spring back there that had additional water that they would pump out of. So when they lost the eminent domain case, the one thing their attorney did well for them is we retained some I guess, I don't know if it's a water right, well it is. We retained a water right to be able to access that property to pump our water off there, but the value of the land is really much more significant. But you know, when they started the 1917 certificate rule, in 42 and in 48 there was additional efforts by the state or the county to restrict the number of users. And at that time, in either 42 or 48, my family had gone and went through the process to try to get it documented, and they got responses back from the appropriate authorities that we had a pre-certificate water right, so at that time it wasn't necessary for them to get anything else. But you know, I had no clue how much of a water grab there has been. You know, it seems like over the last 20 years, 50 years, there have been a lot of land acquisitions by the state. You know, here they took half of a family farm just to meet a rule that they initiated. You know, the wetland mitigation swap, got a truck going by back there, so, but the wetland mitigation swap, that when they put the bypass in, they cut through some wetlands, and so they decided to take half of a family farm just to meet their own requirement. The properties back there is pretty amazing. It's picturesque. This farm itself, we've got some really unique features. Sequim, I'm in the city of Sequim. We're known for our small amount of rainfall. I think we're 14 to 16 inches a year. We get beautiful double terminating rainbows on this place. We're protected from the wind. We get the Roosevelt elk herd that comes through here. It's quiet, it's beautiful, and it really is a little slice of heaven here. And I can only imagine how my uncle felt to lose half of a family farm that had been in his father's possession before him to the state for about $100,000. He died shortly after, and that's really how I acquired the farm. I was able to buy it from the estate. But going back to the water, what the Department of Transportation did is they took that property and they created a wetland. They basically realigned Bell Creek. I think they spent $1.5 million trying to improve the wetland so that the water treatment facility, which is down the road a ways, is now treating water to a standard that's almost a potable water standard. And what they're doing is they're pumping that water across our farm up to Carrie Blake Park, which is just down the road from us, into their fishing ponds. And it's been a 20-year science experiment. You know, we see them pulling dead fish out of that pond all the time. The nitrogen levels are really high. And then they just monitor the effects of the water as it travels down Bell Creek into the bay. And you know, I've talked to everybody from the original contractor that did that site, and one of my uncle's original arguments when they took the eminent domain, he was like, that's not a wetland. You know, he created the wetland by digging the duck pond, and it's dry 10 months out of the year, and it's got water running through it right now, mostly because the sewage treatment plant is adding the water from the treated water that they're doing to go in there. So part of the development process that I went through, the wetland engineer discovered 17 pages, he told me, of adverse effects from wrong temperatures, sediment levels, wrong species, bacteria. I mean, 17 pages worth, on and on. And what they basically did, they tried to take the water right when they did the eminent domain case, but instead they just decided to pollute it. Hindsight is 20/20, and in this case, you know, I don't know if we're beyond the statute of limitations to even address the Superior Court action taking this property, but we did just discover that they have been polluting our water right, and I just would love to have an attorney that has the ability to go up against the state. You know, we don't have the pockets to do that, and I don't know what kind of protections there are for the farmers. You know, I have to say, I am so thankful for the efforts that President Trump has done towards our farmers. the expensing provision for me is even just one of them. You know, here I'm driving an old tractor. I'm going to be able to buy a new one and expense it in its first year. So thank you, President Trump, for that. I also love that he stands for property rights, and who knows, maybe this change in the Supreme Court balance may make a difference here. But, you know, I always assumed, and I think a lot of Americans have assumed, that when you buy a piece of property, it's your property. Little did I know that they can be taken so easily and really taken for no compensation. You know, the city after they, or the state after they end up taking the property, only willing to pay $300,000 and then fine. So, you know, the money that they took, they would drop $1.5 million to rehabilitate it. And when you go back there, it is beautiful, but there's, you know, instances like they took down some bat habitat and they put bat boxes, and they haven't even maintained them. They do stuff just to check a box, and then they've got something that doesn't function correctly. You know, you go back to that property, not only during that $1.5 million restoration did they import material, they imported poison hemlock that they've been trying to get off this property for years. And now I've inherited that, and I've had to continue that process, and you can actually see from the prevailing wind pattern exactly where that blows down the pasture. It goes on and on. I did want to just share this, and I'm probably going on way longer than I need to. Again, I just wanted to just share with some people, because I've been asked the history and my connection to this property. I love this country. I love Sequim. It's a beautiful place to live, retire, raise a family. I've got 4 kids that are all learning to love this place as well. And I just wanted to see if there's anything we can do to kind of take back our land. I think it's a shame that the government can do something like that to a family, a farm that's been in the family for 3 generations. And I don't know, I just had to tell the story.